It's day 9 here of our 12 films of Christmas, where we look back at some of our favourite episodes from the past few years. And with 499 here, going into that beautiful London and South Western Holly Green, we thought we'd take a look at one of the most controversial subjects in the railway world. I hold in my hand what I reckon is one of the most controversial items you can find on heritage railways. As soon as you mention this thing, the chances are you'll start a debate, and it may turn fiery. No, I'm not talking about coal. I'm talking about this, a tin of paint. Locomotive liveries are a surprisingly controversial topic in heritage railways and never fails to stoke a discussion. Take Flying Scotsman, for example. If you mention it, the chances are someone's going to pop up saying it should be back in its LNER apple green for what it was known for. A couple of years ago, the Severn Valley Railway repainted one of their locomotives, Tor Valley, into a special purple to celebrate and commemorate the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and that caused outrage from some parts of the heritage railway movement. And then a year later, they repainted it again to this time more of a wartime black livery, and that caused outrage from another part of the heritage railway movement because it wasn't the livery it originally wore in service. So, what is the right answer? What is the locomotive livery of choice? And how did this all begin? This is going to be a fun one. Now, before we begin, a few caveats and let's say ground rules. The first one is, with the Watercress Line being a Southern Region railway, we're going to concentrate on the Southern story, to an extent. And the second one is, when it comes to locomotive liveries, there were always some locomotives which didn't quite follow the mould. An odd one would slip through here and there, so please bear with. And the third thing is always important to remember, from an engineering point of view, the main purpose of the paint is to protect the metalwork, stop it rusting, preserve the life of the locomotive. It's just very handy that they also found another use for the paint as well. Right, with all of that out of the way, let's go back in time. The railway boom was in full swing, with passengers having a lot of choice when it came to which train operator to run with. Now, how would you make yourself stand out from your competitors? Well, aside from having the biggest and most powerful and best locomotives, one way would be branding. Your paint schemes for your stations, locomotives and rolling stock. Bold colours and stylish linings. That would be a surefire way to make yourself stand out from your competitors. For example, the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway competed with the South Eastern and Chatham Railway for traffic from London down to the South Coast. Now, the SECR were already an amalgamation between South Eastern Railway and the London, Chatham and Dover Railway. Now, granted, they did go to different destinations. The LBSC went to Brighton, South Eastern and Chatham, they went down to Dover. But they did share the route to some extent, so there was competition. At the time, it was usually down to the chief engineer for the company to decide what livery they would be going with. For the SECR here, their chief engineer at the time was Harry Wainwright, and he came up with this, Wainwright Green. Now, the locomotives will be in green and the coaches will be in various shades of brown to complement each other and work together quite nicely. Now, this may come as a surprise to you, but this locomotive here is also green. No, genuinely. Not to be outdone by Wainwright, William Stroudley, LBSC's chief engineer, came up with this, his improved engine green. Now, this prompted many hilarious questions, from whether he was just colourblind to whether he saw this as an improvement on the existing engine green. I guess we may never know. Elsewhere, the London and South Western Railway, which ran the original Mid-Hants route, they opted for this, Holly Green. Now, 499 is going to be outshopped in this, so when it emerges from Ropley, you'll be able to see it for yourself. But anyway, the important thing to remember is that all of these companies had their own liveries which all stood out. But that was about to change. In 1923, Southern Railway was formed, which brought all of these companies into the new amalgamation. Understandably, this was a massive branding change that was required, from station signage to locomotives and coaches. Richard Mansell, Wainwright's successor in the SECR, opted for this, olive green. So, as coaches were built and went through the paintworks, they came up with this new livery, and that was the same for locomotives as well. It would be the first standard passenger livery for Southern Railway. In 1937, Oliver Bulleid took over as Chief Mechanical Engineer for the Southern region, and he'd become known for many things. Not only his distinctive style of coaches, but also his locomotives as well. The livery he would opt for would be a malachite green. It's a light green, and for the locomotives they'd also have gold leaf on the numbers as well, an extra level of showmanship. Now, unfortunately this had to be changed a few times because, frankly, it was too expensive. Firstly, out went the gold leaf, and that was replaced with yellow paint, and the green itself had to be changed to reduce the pigment. Again, a cost-saving measure, so cheap and cheerful. In 1939, World War II broke out, and the government mandated that all locomotives should be painted black from now on due to the scarcity of paint. This left a bit of an issue when it came to branding, so all the companies had their company name on the tenders and the side tanks, and Sunshine Livery was born. LNER did their own little twist, and with the S15-506 we went one step further. Instead of going for the matte wartime black, we added a gloss to it, which does look rather stunning. In 1948, the railways are nationalised to form British Rail, the government's own arm responsible for operating Britain's railways. And yes, you guessed it, another rebrand. Now, we've talked about cost in the past, but BR looked at it in a different way: practicality. You see, the vibrant colours in pre-7 and pre-grouping were absolutely fantastic, they looked great, but steam locomotives are frankly filthy. And trying to keep these engines clean was a never-ending challenge. So if you could use darker colours, well, that would take the pressure off the staff to an extent. Now, a new livery doesn't just appear out of thin air. Various trials and testing needs to be undertaken first before you could roll it out across the fleet. The paintwork would need to be suitably durable, wouldn't deteriorate with the dirt. Now, this ended up with quite an interesting set of locomotive livery trials, with things like Black 5s being painted in LNER apple green. In the meantime, while all of this was going on, BR needed to introduce a sense of branding and conformity. So what they did was all the other locomotives in the fleet, so whether they were Southern, Great Western, etc., the old logos would be taken off the tender or side tanks and the new BR1 would be pasted on. And then, once the new paintwork schemes were finished and finalised, they could be rolled out nationally. Now, across the fleet, whether it was GWR, Southern Railway, LNER, LMS, the principle would be the same. Everything below the running plate and the boiler would be black, because these areas attract a lot of dirt and it doesn't show as much on black compared to, let's say, light green. Above would vary depending on what the locomotive was going to do. So generally, passenger locomotives would be green, freight-only locomotives would be black, and any mixed traffic like our IVET would be a special lined black. Now, aside from the greens or blacks, the lined blacks, for each region, they took one class of locomotive and painted it this beautiful blue. It would denote their most powerful express passenger locomotive and give it another air of pizzazz. Sounds amazing, until there's one major problem, which was that the pigment in the paint faded a bit too quickly. So it did mean if you did do any patchwork, it would look too noticeable and frankly, a bit awful. You had two choices: not do the patchwork, leave it looking awful, or repaint the whole locomotive. Not ideal. Now, with all of this, there were a few exceptions to the rules. LMS, you didn't see much of the blue livery. They managed to keep hold of their crimson, which was a beautiful colour. And an interesting story came out of the Swindon Works, where these GWR locomotives were built. Understandably, when you transition over to a new livery, there's a bit of, well, a transition period where you have to repaint the new stuff and keep the old stuff running. So the boys at Swindon were told that they were to make one more batch of their beautiful Brunswick green. Once it was used up, over to BR. So they did, they made one more batch of about 500 gallons worth, which did them for many moons indeed. I've no idea if it's true, and I really hope some of them did become a lawyer afterwards. So, there we are. A brief look at the history of liveries, albeit we did gloss over a few things. And the story is still ongoing. It went further on into diesel and electric traction and is even going to this day. I suppose that begs the question, what is the correct livery for a locomotive? You could argue only ones that it ever wore in active service before being preserved. But ultimately, it's down to the owner. It's their locomotive and it's up to them to do with it what they please. If they want to paint it BR black, fantastic. If they want to paint it an interesting purple, great, it looks unique. And if anyone thinks I'm talking sacrilege, well, huge thank you to the Keighley Worth Valley Archives for that one. But that is it from us this time. So folks, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. A huge thank you to our friends at Didcot Railway Centre and the Bluebell Railway for helping us out with this one. and we'll see you next time. Liveries at the time were usually decided by the chief engineer, so the South Eastern and Chatham... Liveries at the time were usually decided by the chief engineer for the appropriate company, so Harry Wainwright... At the time, liveries were usually decided by the chief engineer for the company, so the SCCR's chief engineer, Howie... Getting a bit tongue-tied. At the time, it was usually down to the chief engineer for the company to decide what livery to go with. So, for the SCCRs, Harry Wainwright. At the time, it was usually down to the chief engineer for the appropriate company to decide on the livery they would follow. For the SCCR, I'm souping myself up to it now. How do you not get around saying Harry Wainwright?